Good evening, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. First, I'd like to thank Project Inspire for putting this together and for hosting this, and to all the various websites, Yeshiva World and Matzah, and Torah Anytime, of course, that are broadcasting this live. Obviously, we're in a very, very difficult matzah for the world and for Klal Yisrael in particular. And while I, leave it to the Gedolim to tell us what exactly a particular lesson is for us, it's hard not to notice that the world that we took for granted as recently as a couple of weeks ago suddenly has completely changed. When that happens, obviously you realize that sense of control that we thought we had is gone, because the things that we thought we'd be doing today are obviously not the things that we were actually doing. And this type of matzah really goes to the heart of what we as Jews are supposed to be doing. Right? The Ramban in the Parshas Bo talks about that all of the mitzvahs have a common theme, which is to increase and help us work on our emunah. So now this sort of matzah is happening, gives us an opportunity really to focus on our emunah. And while that concept is with us all year, it's particularly highlighted and strong in the month of Nisan and during the Yom Tov of Pesach. And the Shalom says that Seder night is really the Rosh Hashanah for emunah. That the things that we can accomplish the night of the Seder in terms of increasing our emunah, strengthening our emunah, and getting closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is something that we can't really accomplish the rest of the year. So we're in a zman right now where we're leading up to that night, to that opportunity to really come closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So now is the time to capitalize and really think about and focus on our emunah. Obviously, the backbone of our emunah, the mitzvah, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, is all about Yetzias Mitzrayim. And so focusing on the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim is really what gives us that opportunity to really break down at its most basic what it means to have emunah and the things we're supposed to be focusing on. We're supposed to, in order to understand how to become closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. One of the challenges with the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim, of course, is that because we learn it from such a young age, there's certain aspects to it that we tend sometimes to sort of just gloss over because there's sort of something, we understand this is the way it sort of worked, and didn't necessarily focus and think about and understand what really was happening. I remember hearing once that Rav Hutner said about himself that Bava Kama was his worst mesechta because he could never get over what he called his narish understanding of Bava Kama, because when he learned it from when he was a young boy. Actually, when you think about the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim, the two main human characters were Moshe and Pharaoh. And I think that for most of us, it's pretty easy to look at the way Moshe behaved and the things that Moshe did and say, oh, I need to learn from that. Moshe did it this way, he didn't do this. How did he think about things? What did he say? Because he's Moshe Rabbeinu. And it's obvious that we're supposed to learn from him and have that connection with him. But I think in many ways, Pharaoh, who is Moshe's foil, if you will, we tend, I think, to not really focus too much on the things he said and did, simply because he's Pharaoh. He was a terrible person, and he's not the kind of person we would think that we want to be learning from. But obviously, the Torah includes so much of what Pharaoh said that obviously there's something there for us to learn from. The Torah doesn't include the things that Pharaoh said just because they wanted to make the dialogue riveting and interesting. Right? It's there because there's something that's there for us to learn from. So if you start to think about looking at the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim through the lens of Pharaoh and how Pharaoh experienced things, the things that he actually did, you actually can start to see some things that you might not have otherwise noticed. So for example, I think if you're going to start with Pharaoh, there really is one overarching question you have to wonder about. And this is a question that many of the Meforshim already deal with. If you look through the first 5 Makkos, you see that it constantly talks about the fact that Pharaoh's heart was hardened. But it's always done through the perspective of, it seems that Pharaoh was the one who was doing it. There's a subtle shift by Makkos Shchin, where it doesn't say that Pharaoh hardened his heart. It says, "Vayechazek Hashem esleiv Pharaoh," that Hashem was the one that hardened Pharaoh's heart. Now, again, if you think about it, the Meforshim really all grapple with this issue. the concept of Bechira Chavshis is one of the building blocks of how HaKadosh Baruch Hu deals with his creations. So it seems colossally unfair that Pharaoh essentially lost his Bechira and had no choice but to continue fighting through the last 5 Makkos and have the whole country destroyed and wiped out, and then get punished on top of that, as the Medrash goes on to explain at great lengths. But it seems a little bit unfair. How can it be that HaKadosh Baruch Hu essentially took away Pharaoh's free choice and yet held him accountable for the things that happened, especially after at the end, the last 5 Makkos? And then on top of that, if you're looking at certain specific issues and words and phrases that Pharaoh uses, you start to see certain concepts and ideas that you might not otherwise notice. And these questions I actually originally saw, and some of these ideas I got from Yisrael Miller. So before the Makkah of Barad, Moshe Rabbeinu comes to Pharaoh and gives him a warning. And his warning here is a little bit strange. Actually, the Or Chaim already gets into why exactly Moshe gave him such a strange warning, where he said specifically, bring all the animals. But beyond that, the reaction of the Mitzrayim to Moshe's warning was even more bizarre. The pasuk says, "Hayarayis devar Hashem," those Mitzrayim that feared Hashem, they brought all their animals and their servants inside. But the ones that were not Yarayis devar Hashem, although some brought devar Hashem, they left all their animals outside. Now think about this for a second. Remembering these are actual events that happen with actual people. I don't care how skeptical you are. I don't care how much I believe it when I see it and not before then. The fact is that up until this point, Moshe Rabbeinu had 6 times warned Pharaoh what was going to happen. 4 times he warned him, and it happened a couple times without warnings. But he had warned the Mitzrayim of some radical, wacky things that were going to happen, and they all happened exactly the way he said it would. I don't care if you're skeptical. How do you not bring your stuff inside when he tells you that if you don't, it's all going to be destroyed? And then on top of that, what does fear Hashem have to do with anything? If you only feared Hashem, that's when you were practical enough to know that you should bring your stuff inside? It just doesn't make any sense. Why would anyone behave that way? Everyone should have brought their stuff inside. And the last question, right after the Makas Choshech, so Pharaoh calls in Moshe and says, look, tell you what, you guys go serve Hashem for 3 days like you asked, but leave your cattle behind. Now again, this seems like a little bit of a strange thing for Pharaoh to ask for. The Rishonim are also, again, most of them point out and say Pharaoh was really trying to get some sort of collateral to insist that the Yidden would return. But again, does it make sense to think that the Jewish people, after 210 years of slavery and a Holocaust, are going to return to Mitzrayim on account of a couple of heads of cattle? I mean, it just defies logic. Who would do that? And then Moshe Rabbeinu's response to Pharaoh also doesn't make any sense. Or it seems like not a good response. Moshe's response was, oh, no, not only are we taking our cattle, but you're sending yours as well. I mean, this kind of reminds me of the time that, one of my kids didn't want to go to sleep, and I was trying to get him, go down, hey, bedtime's 8 o'clock. Oh, okay, 8:15, 8 o'clock. Okay, 8:30, 7:45. Right? That's how you negotiate with a 10-year-old. And that was Moshe's response to Pharaoh. He didn't just say no. He said, no, I'm going to one-up you. It seems like a very bit of a strange dialogue there right after Makas Choshech. Okay, so just to recap, there's 3 basic questions I want to try to address. Number 1, how does it seem fair that Pharaoh lost his Bechira during the last half of the Makkos, and that his country was completely destroyed and wiped out as a result? Number 2, why is it that only those Mitzrayim who were Yorayis Devar Hashem brought their animals inside? Anyone who had any sense should have brought their animals inside after the warning that Moshe gave. And number 3, what's this negotiation that's going on between Pharaoh and Moshe Rabbeinu, where Pharaoh seems to be asking for some sort of collateral, and then Moshe says, no, not only we're not going to give you collateral, you're going to give us stuff. What was exactly did Pharaoh think was going to happen that the Jews would do as a result of leaving some cattle behind? I think one way to understand Pharaoh is to recognize that from Chazal's perspective, notwithstanding the fact that at different points in time when the Torah uses the word Pharaoh, it was clearly a different person, Chazal viewed all Paros through the same lens. The Gemara in Saita and Daf Mem Vav Mem Beis says, why was it that Paro was the one that was zoicha, as it were, to enslave Bnei Yisrael? It's because Paro was the one who also was Malava Avram Avinu out of Mitzrayim when him and Sarah came down. Now, obviously, that Paro was not the same person. But from, again, Chazal's perspective, they viewed Paro as being cut from the same sort of spiritual cloth. And therefore, what the Torah says about one Paro really applies across the board to every Paro, because there's a certain, koach tuma or, koach gashmi or ruchias that came with Paro that was the same for all of them. In the beginning of Parshas Miketz, Torah describes Paro's dream, and the Torah says, Paro chalem v'hinei omed al hayar. Now, the way that's typically translated is, you think to translate, in English, Chumash generally translated is, he's standing on the banks of the Nile River. But that's actually a bit of a mistranslation. Al Hayar means on the river. And Chazal point out that that's exactly what Paro was dreaming. He was dreaming that he was standing literally on top of the river, which, okay, it's a dream. It's not in and of itself necessarily so crazy. But Chazal derive from this, and they say that Rishayim stand on top of their gods, whereas Tzaddikim have the fear of God on top of them. I think what that means is as follows. People often relate to Hashem in a way that is less about how do I serve Hashem, and is more about what can Hashem do for me. I need things, and Hashem is the one that I can get them from. So as a result, I need to do my part, because this way I can get the things that I need from Hashem. Right? I serve Hashem because I want not necessarily for him, but I'm doing it for me. Because I want Hashem to make me happy. I want him to give me the things that I need. Now, of course, this really misses the point, and it's the wrong starting perspective to have in serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When you serve Hashem, you're doing it because that's what he wants. And that's what he's saying you should do, not necessarily because it's good for you or good for me, but because that's what Hashem says to do. And as Avdei Hashem, that's the perspective we're supposed to have in serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If a person has a me-first attitude, then it's completely backwards. And really, the underpinning of this attitude, that the only God a person has is himself. The only thing or person or deity that he wants to satisfy is himself. And that's really what Paro is. Right? The Nile was worshipped by the Egyptians as God. But in Paro's mind, the Nile was doing his bidding and serving him and helping him. So he's viewed himself as standing on top of the Nile. Now, of course, with that kind of attitude, you're not really going to have much of a relationship with your God, whoever that you may think that may be. And you don't even realize it. You're living in this fantasy world when you think that you're actually relating to God because you're serving him, but you're only doing it because your starting point is yourself and the things that you want. Moshe comes to Paro, and he says to Paro, with apologies to Charlton Heston, he did not say, let my people go. What he says is, send them out. There's a very subtle distinction here. Saying, let my people go, let them go, means just get out of the way. You don't need to do anything, just step aside. What Moshe was telling Paro was, no. You have to be involved yourself. You have to serve Hashem here too by sending them out. It's not enough for you to just get out of the way. You need to be involved. I mean, if you think about it, the Yidden could have left Mitzrayim at any time during the course of the Makkas. I mean, they weren't working anymore. The Abdus had stopped. HaKadosh Baruch Hu could have easily just made it that they walked out. So why the need for all the pomp and circumstance, all the 10 Makkas? What exactly was HaKadosh Baruch Hu trying to prove? Well, the answer is it wasn't about beating down the Mitzrayim. It wasn't like he needed to beat them into submission so they finally relent and let the Yidden go. It was about demonstrating to Mitzrayim that there's a Borei Olam. It wasn't just for the Yidden. The Yidden knew that already. This is because HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to demonstrate the most powerful empire in the world. That it's not you. You're not in charge. There's a Borei Olam, and he's the one who runs the world. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu, time and time and time again, over the course of the 10 Makkos, was trying to prove to the Mitzrayim and get them to recognize that HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world. Now, the thing is, what's almost ironic, Pharaoh understood this from the get-go. And we should not underestimate how much Pharaoh understood what was going on. When you look at Pharaoh's reaction to when Moshe Rabbeinu came to him the first time, his response was, Mi Hashem asher ashma b'kol. Who is Hashem that I should listen to? Not just who is Hashem, I've never heard of him, but who is Hashem that I've never heard of him that I should listen to him? Meaning, another God? No problem. Right? The Medrash says it's thousands of gods. No problem. You're another God, that's great. But I should listen to him? What's your God done for me? I don't have to pay him any attention. Pharaoh understood exactly what Moshe Rabbeinu was getting at initially, but he didn't want to actually give into it. He didn't want to acknowledge the fact there was a Borei Olam who was on top of everything else. Now, ultimately, by the way, skipping towards the end, Pharaoh understood it, because when he finally sent the Yidden out, he said, Berachtem gam osi. I understand, go serve Hashem, and you should bless me too, because I realize now that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the one that runs the world. Now, this, of course, explains why it was that Pharaoh was trying to let the Yidden go in exchange for the cattle. It wasn't about collateral. It was about Pharaoh trying to convince himself that, look, God's stronger than I am, I get it, but I got some leverage here too. So you know what? We'll negotiate. And this way, when all said and done, the Jewish people can leave. I know they're not coming back, but I'll keep all their cattle. And this way, I can tell my people and tell myself that, look, God and I negotiated. I could have said a good deal. Look, it was the best deal I could get for us. We negotiated, and I did the best I could. But that's why Moshe said to him, no. Not only are we not leaving our cattle, we're taking yours too. God doesn't do deals. God doesn't negotiate. Hashem wants you to send the Jewish people out and wants you to recognize and acknowledge that he's the Borei Olam. Until you're willing to do that, you're missing the point. And so the beatings will continue. Because until you can recognize and acknowledge that, HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows you have not gotten the message. The problem for Pharaoh was he created this fantasy world for himself in which the only God that mattered was Pharaoh. And the real tragedy of this attitude is not that it's inherently just an avera to think and view HaKadosh Baruch Hu this way, but you're living a lie. Because that's just not the way the world works. There is a Borei Olam who's mashgiach on all of us and who runs the world. And as long as you convince yourself that you're in charge, you're just missing the point. In a lot of ways, this is how Pharaoh could go on constantly, just ignoring what was going on around him, country in ruins, and continue to insist that he's not going to let the Jewish people leave. And this explains why the Mitzrayim themselves only brought in their cattle if they were Yorei Devar Hashem. Because that was the whole point of what the Makkos were supposed to be. Was this recognition, this demonstration that HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world. Anyone else, if they didn't fear Hashem, it wasn't about being practical. It was they knew, if I bring my cattle inside, I'm acknowledging that Hashem runs the world. I'm not doing that. And there's a psychological term for this called cognitive dissonance. And only those Mitzrayim who had gotten the message were able to recognize what they needed to do and do the smart thing and bring their cattle inside. And this also explains, of course, what happened and why Pharaoh's heart was hardened the last 5 plagues. See, it's not that HaKadosh Baruch Hu took away his Bechira. The opposite is true. What HaKadosh Baruch Hu did was he strengthened Pharaoh's Bechira. Very often we ask, why don't we see Nisim nowadays? And so a lot of the Mepharshim talk about this. One of the explanations is because if you see a Nes in a way that takes away your Bechira, because how can you possibly not serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu when you've just seen an open Nes? So here was the same thing. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to Pharaoh, look, I don't want you to be unduly influenced by all the Nisim that I'm doing. You're so insistent that you're right. You're so insistent that you're the one that runs the world. No problem. I'm going to help you stand firm, and I'm going to give you some extra backbone so you don't need to give in to the nisim that I'm doing. You'll only change your mind if you come to that conclusion on your own. It wasn't that Kadosh Baruch Hu took away Paro's bechira. It's the opposite. Kadosh Baruch Hu strengthened his bechira and gave him more firmness to be able to stand up and say, I'm not going to do something because I believe that it's right. Okay, so I think now we have a pretty good understanding of Paro's perspective, what was going on during Yetzias Mitzrayim. Okay, but what exactly does that have to do with us? I think that one of the things that we often struggle with on a day-to-day basis when it comes to Emunah has nothing to do with the belief in the existence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Right? I mean, that's easy. Again, the reality is that even if you talk to some of the biggest skeptics out there, recognizing there's a Borei Olam is really not that complicated. It's pretty straightforward. And for those of us who were born into it, especially, it's something you take a second nature. The problem is recognizing that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is with us in every aspect of our lives, and that the things that we think are important to us don't necessarily mean that that's the way that things should go. But we have this tendency to just think, oh, it's important to me, and I need to make sure this is going to happen. And therefore, if it doesn't, suddenly I've got tremendous frustration. I can't understand why this is happening to me. What's going on? And that's where our Emunah actually starts to play a role. Edgar Allan Poe once put it as, how can I possibly believe in a God that's greater than me? Now, I'm sure that for most of us, we would never say something quite that, kfiradik. But we may say things like, I can't believe I'm sitting in traffic. Why is this line so long? Why did this not work out? Why is it the things that I want to go right are going wrong? But we're not asking these people who are frustrated about other parts of human nature. This is us questioning the reality of the world that we live in. That why doesn't the world bend itself to what I want? When we think about Emunah as, I get it, Hashem created the world, that's great. But when it comes to the basic things that go on in our lives, so often we're not willing to recognize the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world, and we're pushing so hard against it because we're the ones who think that, hey, I'm the one who's running my life. And I think it's not going the way that I want, and this person didn't do what I wanted to do, and this person didn't do what they should do, and why is this working out the wrong way? Wait a second. What happened to Emunah? It's really ironic. And I find this happens to me all the time, where, you'll be learning something about Emunah and you're really working at it, or God forbid, when tragedy is happening, sometimes people have a much easier time tapping into that Emunah and recognizing that HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world, and they kind of just sort of give themselves off to it and say, okay, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will take care of it. But when it comes to the little things, you tend to just sort of lose it. I have this chabura that I learn with in the morning, learning in Yan of Emunah. And I found more often than I want to admit, I'll sit and learn for a half hour, learning stuff in Emunah and B'tachon. It's really, you feel really charged from it. I'll come home and one of my kids or somebody will do something which is very frustrating to me, and I get really upset about it. And it's like, what just happened? I was just learning about Emunah, stagging away for the last half hour, and nothing big bothers me. Everything's great. Not worried about a thing. And all of a sudden, my kid spilled something on the floor, and it's getting so frustrated and upset. Why can't you be more careful? It's like, what am I missing? This idea of Emunah, Hashem running the world, it's got to be with us at all levels. And it's recognizing that we're not in charge. I mean, obviously, what's going on right now, if that didn't help us understand it, I mean, it becomes so obvious to us. But it can't be just in the big things. The little things too. Every step along the way, we have to recognize that the purpose of our relationship with Hashem is not about us. As long as it's about us, you're just missing the point. You can be doing everything you're supposed to be doing. Learn Torah, doing mitzvahs, chesed, all the wonderful, amazing things that you didn't do every single day. But if your starting point for doing it is because this is what I want, because I want HaKadosh Baruch Hu to shower me with bracha, or because it just makes me feel good, and well, if it doesn't make me feel good, or I want to do it a certain way, even though people are saying I shouldn't, Gedolim tell me not to do it that way, but it's what I want. you're missing the point. We're supposed to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu because that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants. And if you don't have that as a starting point for your perspective, you're just missing it. Now the thing is, this could present a little bit of what I'd call a emotional problem for us. Because the thing is, if you're thinking about HaKadosh Baruch Hu purely as, look, I'm just going to do everything that he wants and it's all about him, sometimes that can make you feel a little bit like, well, shouldn't something be in it for me? I mean, how do I know that I'm doing all these things for him? How do I know that he's going to do something for me? Now that attitude is a little bit, again, missing the point, but at the same time, from an emotional perspective, as human beings living in the year 2020, it can be a little hard at times to not have a little bit of that feeling. We all have that friend who the only time they call is when they need something, and then they're your best friend and everything's great. But sometimes you feel like, wow, I really, for the right reason, I'm kind of doing this hoping my friend and really have a deeper relationship as a result, but I kind of know we're not going to. You get a little bit of an issue with HaKadosh Baruch Hu sometimes, again, at an emotional level, where you feel like, is that right? I don't know. I'm actually struck by this often. When you daven Shemona Esrei 3 times a day, at the end of Elokai Nitzar, you say, Aseh L'man Shemecha. And it's something we say during Slichos all the time. Aseh L'man Shemecha. Hashem, do it for your sake. And frankly, that strikes me as so disingenuous at times. But I know when I'm negotiating a deal, and I say, look, let's do this. You do this for your benefit, right? Yeah, I'm saying do it for your benefit because I know it's really for my benefit. But it seems almost like fake that we're telling HaKadosh Baruch Hu, do it for your benefits. Really? I don't know. It just seems a little bit like, do we really mean that? Do we really have that relationship? I think it's really, really important. 2 different, I don't call them vartlachs, I want to share, put into perspective the way our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu is supposed to be. So first, at the beginning of Parshas Ve'era, Moshe Rabbeinu comes back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and says, look, you want me to go talk to Pharaoh and Yisrael. No one's listening to me. This is just not going to work. Come on. And Hashem's response is a little bit interesting. Hashem just says, he just kind of says, no, he commands him to go back to Bnei Yisrael. So the Kedushas Levi says something absolutely fascinating. He says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gets such incredible nachas ruach from being a meitiv to us. He gets such incredible enjoyment out of Klal Yisrael out of his being a meitiv to us, out of his doing good things for us. It's so enjoyable for him that it's a mitzvah for Klal Yisrael to accept that benefit, to accept that hatava from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That every time we get bracha from Hashem and we take it, it's a mitzvah. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu gets such nachas. That kavayachol, this is the kind of thing that some of the Kedushas Levi could say, that we're doing HaKadosh Baruch Hu a favor by taking the hatava he's giving to us, the good things that he's doing for us. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants so badly to give us good things that it's pasha the mitzvah for us to take it. And when you recognize that's the relationship, suddenly things are very different. Because now you know that the person you're dealing with 100% has your best interests in mind. And another vart I want to share. This I heard originally from Nelson Greenberg, who's a Rav here in Far Rockaway. HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Avram Avinu to Shefti Yitzchak. And when he's giving him the tzivui, he says, go take es bincha es yechidcha asher ahavta es Yitzchak. And again, Chazal explained, Rashi explained why exactly he had to do it that way. But he uses those 3 explanations. Es bincha yechidcha asher ahavta. Yet, after HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Avram Avinu not to Shech Yitzchak, and he told him, I recognize that you're a Yirei Hashem now, because of the fact that you were ready to Shech Yitzchak. He says, but he doesn't describe Yitzchak the same way. He describes Yitzchak as Es bincha es yichidcha. He leaves off the words Asher Ahavta. Bernard Weinberger, who was the Rav of the Young Israel of Williamsburg back in the 40s and 50s, explains that from Avram Avinu's perspective, Yitzchak was gone. the son that he had been waiting for his entire life. HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him, you have to shacht him. And Avram Avinu, being Avram Avinu, said, okay. And in his mind, Yitzchak was gone. Now, can you imagine the simcha that Avram Avinu felt when he was told by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, no, he's still yours, keep him. The emotion that Avram Avinu felt for Yitzchak at that point, the word ahavta doesn't do justice to how Avram Avinu felt about Yitzchak at that point. There simply isn't a word in the Hebrew language to encapsulate the outpouring of emotion and love that Avram Avinu felt for Yitzchak. There's no way to describe it. So the Torah didn't bother. And we're going to say in Shemona Esrei and Yontif coming up in a couple of weeks, Ahavta osanu, you loved us. Why the past tense? So explain to Ray Greenberg, it's the same thing. Maybe once upon a time, HaKadosh Baruch Hu loved us. But now, the word love simply doesn't do justice to how HaKadosh Baruch Hu feels about Klal Yisrael, about each and every one of us individually. The feelings that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has for us are so strong that simply can't be described in words. When you recognize that that's the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu feels about you, having the perspective of I want to serve him for his sake because he wants me to, suddenly it's much easier to do. Because that bond, that relationship is so strong before you've even lifted a finger. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves you just because of the fact that you're a Yid. When you recognize that, suddenly it's easy to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu from the right perspective, from the right place. Because how can you not serve somebody who loves you that much? But here's the ultimate Hashem move. When you put yourself into that place, and you're serving Hashem because that's what he wants, and you recognize that the world's being run by Hashem, and that he knows what's best for us way better than we ever will, why would you ever worry about anything? Yeah, things aren't necessarily going to go your way. Not the way you expected, at least. Then you say, remember yourself, hey, what I expected, what I wanted, that probably wasn't necessarily what was best for me. I know there's somebody who does know what's best for me. I know Hashem knows what's best for me. Now all of a sudden, you can just enjoy life. Because what do you have to worry about? Everything you could possibly need is going to be taken care of for you. All you need to do is just recognize and open yourself up to that relationship. A relationship that's already there. Hashem's already there for us. He already wants to give us everything we could possibly ever want. And he gets more enjoyment out of us getting the things that we enjoy than we do. So what's to worry about? And just to end, one of the things that's so important to remember is I don't think anything that I've said tonight is a chiddush, or anything that I've said tonight we haven't heard before. We just have to remind ourselves of it. It's so easy, unfortunately, in the hustle and bustle of life, as we go through the difficulties that we all go through, to just lose sight of the fact of how Hashem feels about us, and lose sight of the fact that he wants better for us than we ever could want for ourselves. But if we just constantly remind ourselves, and we constantly try every single day to just remember what we're supposed to be doing. And as the Ramban points out, all the mitzvahs that we have, all the mitzvahs that we do, are supposed to lead us to this same conclusion, to strengthening our emunah in Hashem. And when we take that, and especially in times of difficulty, we recognize that it's not about us. It's all about Hashem. And he loves us more than we can possibly imagine, more than we even love ourselves. And with that, I would just hope and pray the bracha for all of us, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should bring an end to these tzaros immediately. Mitzvah Hashem, for the Ula, B'nisin, Nigalu, B'nisin, Hasidim, Ligal, giving everyone a kasher,